Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. Okay, so today joining me is Skye Carignan. This is what happens after a long day. So joining me today is Skye Carignan, and she is, let me just say, she's an amazing person, and I want to talk a little bit about guest selection, because when I'm looking for different people to be on the podcast, what I'm looking for is somebody who's got a compelling story, somebody who's got a story that's going to resonate with other people, and so I was kind of amazed that I didn't know some of the things about Skye that I learned, and so I knew once I found those things out that she needed to be on the podcast, and luckily for me, she was willing to be on the podcast. So I'm just going to give a little bit of her background information. She is active member at Central Church of Christ right here in Chattanooga. She was born in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1998. And was placed in foster care with a Christian couple in Durham, North Carolina. Her foster parents attended church where her future adoptive parents also attended, and so they would later adopt Skye in 2000 and move to Thompson, Georgia. Since that time, her family moved around quite a bit, about every 2 years, probably about, you said maybe 15 times.
Mm-hmm.
During.
I think so.
Yeah, that's a lot. And then finally landing in Chattanooga. Skye grew up. She attended Faulkner University, and she graduated from Faulkner with a Bachelor's of Science in General Clinical Psychology, and she now works at Youth Villages, which is an intensive in-home-based program that provides interventions to youth and family to prevent children from being removed from their homes, and also to help reunify families. Skye, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so there's a whole lot of stuff that I left out in your childhood that we're going to get into, and I probably just need to say we're going to cover some sensitive areas, and so I just want to throw that out there to the listeners that this is going to be a little bit different podcast, but I think you have things that need to be heard and need to be shared, and I think they're going to be very helpful to a particular demographic, especially, we're going to kind of circle this around and hit on some of the spiritual dimensions of your situation and how that's impacted you. So I'm just going to let you kind of share what you want to share as far as the adoption process and your childhood, some of the things that you've shared with me. So I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit about what your childhood looked like.
Okay. So my biological parents were not married when my mom got pregnant with me. I actually have a older sister who's 7 years older than me that was also put up for adoption. I don't know who she is. We don't have any contact, anything like that. And funny enough, my biological parents never planned on having children. So, like I said, I was placed in foster care, from what I remember, like pretty immediately, like from the information that I've been told, pretty immediately after I was born. And I was in the same foster home for about 2 years before I was adopted. And there were, I think, maybe one or two families that almost adopted me but didn't work out, which kind of led into some of my issues, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. And the adoption process, from my parents have told me, words pretty quickly. They had the great advantage of attending the same church that I was at, so they're able to see me frequently, have home visits pretty easily, and it happened really quickly. You hear stories of how adoptions take years and years, which fortunately this was not the case. I don't know exactly like the timeline of how long it took, but they adopted me, and then pretty sure within like 2 or 3 weeks, we moved to Thompson, Georgia, where my dad got a preaching job there. And, we just kind of, like I said, we kind of moved pretty frequently to congregation, wherever my dad could find a job. And that's kind that's kind of how my life has been.
Okay. So there were some issues, and let's go back to to the reason that you were put up for adoption. You mentioned that your biological parents did not really plan on having kids. You mentioned fetal alcohol syndrome, and that was something that you probably don't remember, but that was one of the issues you had as an infant, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm assuming that your adoptive parents were aware of that. Your foster family was aware of that.
Yes, they were aware of the fetal alcohol syndrome. They weren't aware of reactive attachment disorder, which is called RAD for short. So what I've been told is that my mom was drinking alcohol while she was pregnant with me. I think there was some question of substance use as well. So as a result, when I was school age, learning was very difficult for me. I wasn't grasping kind of like the most foundational things. And what my parents described it as they're like wires in my brain that some of them don't cross. Like there's this no connect. So I would do these exercises to help train my brain to make everything connect. So I would do figure eights with my hands, and I would have to crawl on the ground just to have that connect with my left brain to right brain, because the damage that was done, it was just kind of made things a little bit more difficult for me.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk a little bit. Let's get into the RAD. Okay, so you said that really quickly. I don't know if people picked it up. So explain what that is.
So RAD is reactive attachment disorder. In simplest terms, it's kind of described as kids who have emotional neglect or abuse, and in turn, they don't form an emotional bond with their caregivers, whether it's adoptive parents or biological parents or whatever. It is most commonly seen in adoptive families. It doesn't matter age. It's kind of surprising that when I say I have it, even though I was adopted at almost 2, they're like, well, your family is all you ever known, which is true. But, learning about my adoption process and just having the knowledge of, my biological parents didn't want me, that's hard to come to terms with, even though I've been with my family for most of my life. So in turn, I did not form attachments very well. I was kind of scared of them, and it was most directed towards my adoptive mom. I had it in my head that she took me from my biological mother, which is so far from the truth. So I always had a resentment towards her, and we did not have a good relationship until I was a teenager.
Okay. I'm trying to sit here and think how that would have impacted your mom. It would have been hard for her, I think, to try to understand, why isn't Skye loving me like a daughter should love me or whatever. And I think one of the things about, even in a good case situation where a child, if you're adopted, you eventually have to come to terms with the fact that your biological family, for whatever the reason, and a lot of them are really good reasons.
Sure,
you should be, I know some are so thankful that they were adopted, right? But it's still that deep-seated question of, I'm an innocent little baby, right? How do you just give that away? And that's that's a good case situation. Yours is a little bit more complex because we have some other issues going on there. And well, let's just jump into that, okay? Because this is one that I think is worth pursuing. So your biological parents are white, or not? No. I'm sorry, your adoptive parents are white. Yeah. Okay. People are watching this like, are you an idiot? Do you understand biology? Okay, so that adds some nuances to this whole conversation, right? Because now you're going to reach a certain age as an adolescent, okay, as a young black female, and you get to a point and you're like, okay, something's not this is different, you know. So how early on did you begin to notice like mom and dad are white and I'm not?
I honestly don't even know. I think it was just, I mean, obviously you see the difference, but I guess in like my brain, I kind of never did. And if I had questions about it, I honestly don't remember. And I'm kind of blanking on what like my parents have told me like growing up. But I mean, they did, any questions that I had about anything, they were very open about it. So, whether it was like questions about my hair or, anything like that, they were open about it and they tried to find answers if they didn't have answers. So they tried their best to make it, our normal so it wouldn't be so weird, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So now I'm thinking about my own daughter when she was like 11, 12, 13. She's hitting that rebellious stage anyway. And, mom and dad are idiots. And, so I'm in your situation where you're struggling to, at that age, probably, you've got all these questions that adolescent girls are going to have anyway. But you've got the added baggage of, okay, I'm adopted. I am not the same skin tone as my adoptive parents. They really, really don't understand me, or what I'm going through, because all teenage girls probably at some point reach that anyway.
Yeah.
But you've got these added things to that. So how did that get navigated for you and your parents?
That's a really good question because on top of my baggage, I was also very rebellious. And because I thought that they didn't understand me, I kind of had no regard for them. So I would kind of use my baggage sometimes as a crutch as to why I was acting certain ways, which was kind of the truth, kind of not. So I think my parents did the best they could. Like I said, like I didn't really have a good relationship with my mom for a long time, so I did have a better relationship with my dad. So I spent a lot of time with my dad growing up because we were kind of on better terms. So, and we would find things that we enjoyed doing, and we would find things we would have in common, just so I would have some attachment, and that way we could still have some level of communication. Whereas, like, I didn't really want to have any communication with my mom, and if I did, I wanted to be the one to choose what we're talking about, what we're doing. If she tried to suggest something or try to talk to me about anything, I would like shut it down. I was like I don't know anything to do with you. Yeah. So I was hard for both sides, but I don't know, kind of made it through it.
So when did the reconciliation begin with you and your mom? Was there a certain age or a certain thing or pivotal moment?
Yeah, so when I was 9, I believe, 9, my parents were we were living in Pennsylvania. My dad was preaching on congregation there, and they thought it was best. It was like probably the height of my behavioral problems. It was really bad. They suggested that I live with my uncle who lives in Tennessee near almost close to Kentucky, that I stay with them. I stay with him and his family for a little while because where he lives is just a really small town. It's not, 2 red lights, like very small town, very poor community. And they thought that kind of needed a reality check because also at the time I wanted everything. I wanted to be like everybody else. I wanted to have what everyone else had. So they're like, let's send you there, kind of reality check and get to spend time with your family. So I saw it as like a little vacation, like, get away from my family for a little while. I could spend time with family I didn't get to see a lot. And we did that twice. So I spent a year with him, with my uncle and his family, and I came back to live with my parents in Pennsylvania. And it was okay for the first couple of months when I was back, and then it just kind of went back to how it used to be. So at the end of that year, my dad was going to basic training for the Army, so it was just going to be me, my mom, my little brother, and my mom knew she couldn't really handle me on her own without my dad there. So I went back to live with my uncle a second time. I was 12 at this point. And throughout that year, that second year living with my uncle, I just kind of, it was like a light switch. I was like, I hate being separated from my family. I hate the way I've been acting. I want to have like that typical, daughter-mother relationship where you go shopping, get your nails done. I know that I didn't have that. So that was probably like my year of like, I really need to shape up. I need to ask for help. I need to figure out what to do so that I can, have a good relationship with my family. So after that second year, I went back, and that's kind of been like real progress was shown, and I was able to reconcile with my family kind of permanently.
I want to ask you about your uncle. Is this a biological uncle or
No.
your adoptive?
My adoptive, it's my mom's older brother.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that was a pretty significant relationship for you to have that, I guess. What's the word here? Just being out of the chaos. Okay, that was part of part of that family, and kind of doing a reset with his family.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a relationship that still carries on today?
Yeah, I don't see them a lot. I will say that my mom is the youngest of four, so she's the baby. So all of my cousins are like 10 years older than me and up. So the age gap between me and my cousins have kind of played into like not talking as much, but we still have a good relationship. I see them as often as I can, but I am thankful for that time that I spent with him, because I think it made me kind of realize what I was doing, and it helped me figure out of wanting to change. There was some pushback from my family of whether or not that was a good decision for my parents to send me there. And I have told them that it was, even if they don't believe it. It really changed my life.
Okay, so I want to get, as I'm thinking, when you're telling the story, I'm picturing, like all these cousins and all these people around you and stuff. I want to talk a little bit about the cultural implications. You're surrounded by a bunch of white people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm wondering what this looks like when you go to school, and I don't know. But are there other black children at your growing up, and they're like, oh, your parents are white, and trying to deal with like the questions that come with a disconnect from your biological family.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're being raised by white people, and a disconnect from like your biological heritage culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that looks, by the way, for those listening, there's multicultural awareness kind of stuff that comes into this that a lot of people don't recognize or think about. Part of black culture is there's this, and I'm going to fumble all over the place trying to explain this. So,
okay.
and again, I'm speaking in which camera am I looking at now? Who am I talking to? This one here. Okay, so this is for the listeners. I'm just broad strokes here. So, like white people are not as we're more individualistic. Like we don't have that. And jump in, Skye, if I'm saying
okay.
something that's like, no, that's not right. but there's not a sense of like community as much as in some other cultures that we have, and I'm thinking about, you have a strong sense of community because of shared historical events that have happened. So obviously, we can't ignore the cultural difference here in America, and look at just the past 200 years. So there's a significant thing there with people of color and their specific heritage and cultural, even though they may not know ancestors past maybe 2 generations or 3 generations, they still have that sense of community that is deeper and more collective, I guess, than white people do.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm saying anything here that's completely mind blowing or anything. I mean, it's just sociologists and psychologists have this. You can read about this stuff. All right, so I'm saying all of that to kind of unpackage this this double whammy for you, right? The adoptive piece of it, but now there's also was there a sense of like, man, who am I? Like,
Yeah.
How do I connect?
I was homeschooled off and on as well as being in public school, but when I was in public school, it was very, very strange because once I started being around more black kids, they would like wonder, why is your hair like that? Or why don't you dress like you're supposed to? Why don't you talk like us? And, when I was young, I was like, I don't know. Like, these are the clothes my parents bought me. This is how I talk. And it probably wasn't until I was like in middle school that I started to really wonder, who am I? Like, yes, I am black, but am I really? Like, I've always been told that like I'm the whitest black girl you would ever meet. A lot of people would say that to me, and I would kind of laugh it off. But as I got older, I was kind of like, that's kind of rude. Like, you don't need to say that.
Yeah.
And I remember this one particular instance. I was in 8th grade. We were in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, on the Army base, and I had a chorus concert, and my family came, my grandparents came, which were all white, and people from school were there. The next day, this girl was constantly coming up to me and be like, "Your parents are white, huh?" And she would laugh and like turn away, and she would keep coming up to me throughout the day, just pointing out that my family was white. And you would think in that environment, Army, where there's so many blended families, like that should not have been anything that they hadn't seen before, but it was something that she just really thought that she needed to point out to me. So it's been hard at times to be comfortable in how I talk, how I dress, how I do my hair or what I say or whatever, what things I do know, what things I don't know because of the environment that I grew up in. And there are still times where I'm probably a little bit insecure, but, I'm trying to remember that that's just how I grew up, and I'm thankful for how I grew up, and I don't have to fit in any type of norm or any type of box.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you say to, and I don't know, you may have come across this issue doing what you do, is it for a job? Is there opportunity for you to talk to other um, black children, females specifically, that may be in similar circumstances? And it may not be just like from an adoptive standpoint, but just like trying to establish who you are, like your identity kind of stuff, the crisis of adolescence and finding identity, because there's so much messages going on, like you need to be this or you need to be that. So is that something you deal with and can use your past, your own story?
I try to use my story as much, as often as I can, because I think it's very unique, and I am hopeful that it will touch somebody and that someone will resonate with it, because, not only being a girl, being a black girl, or being an adoptive black girl, like there are so many criterias that I can check to help somebody, going through all of that, or just going through something like normal that I want to help them through. So I feel like I am very fortunate in the career that I'm in to use my story to help people, because a lot of the kids I work with, like, they feel like no one understands. And situations similar to mine, I can understand how they feel that way, and I want them to know at least one person understands. May not be the exact same situation, but maybe there's some things that we can relate to that I can help you with.
Okay, so can we talk about your older sister?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so how much older is she than you?
She's 7 years older than me.
Okay, 7. So you've been adopted. You're trying to find out, just kind of like get adjusted and stuff. And as you're getting a little bit older, you're having questions maybe, and just needing somebody to look up to and to be like, I can grab hold of that. That's something out of all the questions that I have in my life and the things that I don't really intellectually, I'm too young to actually deal with and understand, like, these other concepts. So you latch onto your sister, your older sister, right? And she's smart, and she shares your same faith background. So to walk me through what happened there.
So, like I said, she's 7 years older than me. Growing up, I was honestly very jealous of her because she had one of the things I was jealous about is that she had the bond with my mom that I wanted. Of course, I was the one pushing my mom away, so it's nothing that my mom was doing wrong, but I saw how close they were. And I kind of resented her for it. And also, she was very accomplished. Like, she graduated high school when she was 15. She did about a year and a half of community college before she was 16. And then she went into the Army at 17. And she was in the Army for I feel like almost 4 years, I think, before she got injured. So she was just, making all these milestones really young. And everyone would, my family would praise her and talk highly of her. And I was like, well, aren't they talking about me that way? And I was showing that I was jealous of her, but deeply I admired her and respected her for doing all of those things. So because of that jealousy, like, we did not have a good relationship growing up, and she was honestly out the house a lot when I was growing up because of she was, in college and everything like that. So that's kind of how our relationship was for the most of the time growing up together.
Okay. So talk about the spiritual dimension of that too, as far as her, maybe looking to her as, that example. She's smart and she's a Christian, and then then she doesn't adhere to that. Like, what was that like for you?
So when she got injured while she was in the Army, she came back to live with us. And she came back when she was 21, so I would have been like 14. That was the first time that we had been in the same house together in a long time. So that was a hurdle that we had to kind of jump through and learn how to be sisters and live in the same house. But about a year into her living with us or staying with us again, she was engaged. And so that was another thing I had to battle my jealousy with. It was all about her again. Yeah. And that engagement didn't work out. She broke off the engagement and started dating someone new. And how that situation was very messy. It was not the right way to handle it. It's kind of chaotic in our house for a while, dealing with all of that. And in the midst of a broken engagement, she was now going to move in with this new guy a couple 100 miles away to another state that we also had to deal with. And a combination of that, she said that she was leaving the faith. And she didn't believe anymore. She felt like our parents had pressured her into getting baptized too young and making her believe all these years. And she's always had questions and claimed that my parents never answered those questions or refused to. So just making all these claims against my parents and our background, which we've always been Church of Christ. Like I said, my dad's a preacher. So those were some deep cutting claims she was making, very hurtful. So with all that going on, she moved away, and that was kind of the break in our relationship. We didn't talk for 2 years until she came. She and her now husband, the one she eventually married, came from my parents for our renewal. And that was the first time I'd seen her, about 2 years. And that was kind of difficult because, of course, we want everyone to be happy, but also it was just, can't forget what happened. And that was in 2016, and that was the last time I've seen her, was the spring of 2016.
Okay. Yeah, that's hard, especially, I'm thinking of you like as a 14-year-old girl, and how do you cope with, it's just like layer after layer after layer. So talk about a little bit about like resiliency, and what was it that actually, just kind of kept you from drifting off into, the void?
I think knowing what that void was like not being connected with my family for so many years, was awful. And there are some parts of my childhood that I do not remember, that I have blocked out because they were traumatic. And there are things like my parents have said, like, remember when this happened? Like, I have no idea. That didn't happen if you ask me, because it's just, I don't want to think about it. So knowing how I was and how our relationship was, I was like, I don't want to go back to that. And I feel like that's kind of when my sister left, I kind of stepped into the role of protector because my parents were crushed. My little brother would have been 7 at the time. And he, at the time, had a close relationship with my sister because I was at the house living in Tennessee with my uncle. So I also had to, like, rebuild a relationship with him, but also be a good model for him. So it was just kind of, I need to protect my parents, I need to protect my brother. You know, we need to be there for each other during this time. And that's what I held on to the next coming year, is just wanting to be a close-knit family and amongst this really chaotic, awful thing that's happened.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about being single.
Okay.
And again, we can't remove all of the the cultural implications of who you are. You're being raised by parents that are not biologically your parents. Although you reach a point, you're like, this is my mom and dad, right? So, and I get that. The identity piece in that, like what's the expectation there? Man, I have so many questions here, like how that looks. And I know, I mean, it's probably the, like good, well-adjusted, healthy people would be like, you don't date based on what a person looks like. You date what's on their heart, right? You want to date a person who's going to bring you closer to God. How did that get navigated, and like where are you at now as far as like if you're going to look to date a person, like what does that look like for Skye?
I am at a point where I am wanting to settle down. I always hoped that I would marry young, which I know I still am young. But like you said, like I want someone who has the same goal as me, which is getting to heaven, staying faithful. And I feel like the dating culture is very not that right now. Like, there's always like just wanting to fling or just wanting to hook up or not dating seriously. They're staying around, and I'm not really here for that. I'm not at the point in my life where that interests me at all. So dating, I want to date someone who will help me become closer to Christ and has the same goal and also wants that for himself, and that I could see as a good leader for my future family, and a good partner in life for me as well.
Yeah. What's the dating pool look like out there right now? I mean, is it slim?
Slim, Craig. It's awful.
So what's I've had several on the show that are single, and it's kind of like same position you're in. They're looking for like a meaningful relationship, not we're in such a hookup culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, as Christians, we shouldn't be. That should definitely not be our paradigm of how we look at things. But the flip side of that is where are all the good Christian single people?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the plan? What's God's ultimate plan for you?
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about that. And I'm not a female, but I can imagine that may be a little bit harder for girls, single Christian girls today, because it's like you don't want to go banging down doors, right? It's it's kind of like
No.
you're looking for the guys to ask you out, right?
Yes.
I mean,
that would be nice.
So yeah, what's the thought there for you on that? Like, what does that look like?
One of the things that like my parents have always said is like you're not gonna find a good Christian, or depending on your environment is where you're gonna find good Christian men. Like if you're hanging out at bars,
Sure.
if you're going to parties, you're probably not gonna find someone that you're looking for in those type of places. So very fortunate to have a great friend group who I met here at Central, and they have friends and they have connections and people, um, you know, people always visiting Central. So, I mean, that's my hope that, I think meeting at church is a great first place to meet somebody.
Absolutely.
You already know that they have, they're on the way of thinking the same things that you are. So I think that helps. But also, different circumstance that I could meet someone on the street tomorrow that, but who knows?
Yeah. Um, for the single guys that are interested, we're going to put Skye's phone number. No, just kidding. We won't do that. So we're going to wrap things up, but first of all, I just want to say thank you for being so candid, and some of the stuff's sensitive to talk about. And what advice do you have to people who are listening that are wondering about their own identity, especially for younger kids that may be adopted, that and not necessarily being raised in a blended family, but obviously you have that as well that you had to navigate. But just talk a little bit about how did you finally find out who you are, like your identity, and became comfortable with your family? What does that look like?
That's a hard question. It's a very loaded question.
Yeah, I didn't mean for it to be.
I'll answer the first one about like how I became comfortable in family, I guess. It was probably after that second trip to my uncle's that I came home from, and I got back and I was thinking of kind of like all the sacrifices that my parents have made up until that point of trying to show me and tell me that they were choosing me every single day. They were not giving up on me. They loved me even through those many bad years, and realizing how grateful I am for them. And I think about, what if I wasn't placed in foster care with a Christian couple? What if I wasn't adopted by a Christian family? Like, who knows what my life could have been? So I'm just so blessed and thankful of my situation. And I think that's what kind of clicked for me as like, yes, my situation is very complicated. It's very complex. But I wouldn't have it any other way. So I think that's what kind of helped me be grounded of just accepting and loving the family that I have in my situation. As far as advice, I would probably just say, like, it takes time to figure out who you are and what your place is, and I think that time is okay. I feel like a lot of people rush to, or adopted kids may feel the rush to kind of click immediately with their family and like the same things they do, or dress the same, or just to feel some type of normalcy of not being the odd one out, whether it's a blended family or not. So just listening to yourself of it's okay that you may not like the same things as your adoptive family. You may look a little different, but they're still their family and they got to choose you, which is something my parents reminded me all the time as of like, we had the chance to choose you and we would choose you every single day. And I think I would advise that to someone of just being thankful of being chosen. I think that's a really huge advantage and huge blessing.
I'm glad you ended with that, because as you're sitting there talking about, I was sitting here thinking, despite our rebellion, as people, as Christians, despite our continued rejection and I don't want to have anything to do with you, and just continually running away from God, He still chooses us every single day. He's like, you know what, I choose you. You're my children, and I love you regardless of what you've done, what you look like, your past, your history, your identity. Your identity is in me, and that is the best place that you can be. And when you stop and you think about it, because we're constantly comparing, families and wealth and all the materialistic stuff. But you step back and you think, the Creator of the universe, the King of Kings, has chosen us as His adoptive children, and we've been grafted in to that. And I mean, we get to sit beside our brother Jesus as his brothers and sisters, that are enjoying the inheritance. And man, what an awesome identity that is. And your story reminds me of that, and that's pretty cool. All right, final thoughts as we start to close out. Well, before we get to the final thoughts, hang on, don't cue the music just yet. I want to say subscribe and like the channel if you like what you're seeing. We are broadcasting on all the social media platforms and Apple, Spotify, and all that kind of stuff. We also have a YouTube channel, The Lion, the Way, and the War. And we also have a email address. If you have questions or would like us to talk about a specific topic, by all means, send us an email to The Lion, the Way, and the War at gmail.com. You see it right there on the screen if you're watching on our YouTube channel. Okay, so we're going to close out now with Scripture. And this is one, I think it's appropriate. This is one you gave me, Jeremiah 29:11. Says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." And that's a great thing for us to remember as we go forward. All right, everybody, until our next podcast of Lion, the Way, and the War, be kind to one another, love one another. Remember that the creator of the universe loves you so much that he gave up his only son for you. Have a blessed day.